my goal as a guitarist right now is to sit down and be absolutely present for whatever time I have and to be really mindful of certain things. And I teach this to my students too, which is, and it's very similar to how athletes work, which is to hyper focus on maybe just a tone in my right hand or my left hand placement. And then to make time in my practice every time I play to just be joyful, right? And it could be I'm working on a Bach fugue, or it could be I'm just making up some folky fingerstyle thing, or maybe I'm going to fire up my electric guitar. And my real focus right now is to enjoy it.
Whether you're a self-taught musician, have a teacher, or you're already a professional, this show is meant to help you with knowledge, mindset, craft, and strategies to improve your overall musicianship so that you can become the best musician you can be, regardless of your goals. Welcome to Musicianship Mastery. Hello and welcome. This is episode number 136. I'm David Lane. It is great to be with you once again. And we're going to go ahead and jump into this. So a lot of times when I have a guest, the way it comes about is I choose a topic that I want to discuss, and then I go find the guest that I think best suits that topic. But in this case, I found the guest I wanted to have a conversation with, and I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but we'll go ahead and get into it. So let's just start off with I'm talking to Eric Branner today. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here, David. It's good to see you.
So I guess just a brief recap of our personal connection, and then I'll ask you, just a little bit about what's been going on in your world professionally. But I feel like I met you around 2019. I feel like you're a pre-COVID, barely pre-COVID connection. It was kind of when I was starting to find musicians on Twitter and, got a lot of, there's like several of us that had like 35 mutual connections or something like that, that they were all like musicians, and so forth. And, I had no idea who you were. I just, it's like, that's another music guy. And I think the first time I commented on anything you did was you were asking about something about like 80s, like, oh, I don't know if it was like glam rock or some kind of songs you were just asking, the Twitterverse about. And I threw in Great White, and we had a little thread back in that. It's like, you're like, oh man, I haven't heard that name in a long time. And then you started posting about Fons, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't really think much about that. Then I heard you on a podcast. We might be getting into 2020 by now, and it was used to be hosted by, I think, Tracy Verlander. It was Crushing Classical, and I heard you chat on that as well, and got to learn about you and about Fonz, and I kind of took a renewed interest in just following you a little bit more closely. And it took a while before we chatted in person we chatted like this on my other podcast, and I had already started joining the Facebook group, the Fonz family, and maybe about a year later, I became a client myself. So so longtime listeners, you're like, oh, I thought Fonz sounded familiar. Yes, I have mentioned Fonz quite a bit. Eric is the CEO, among many other hats, and all the descriptions, all the show notes for each podcast episode have a link to Fonz, and we'll come back to that. We'll save Fonz talk for the end. But it was nice. I finally got to meet you in person, off of these screens back in March in Minneapolis. So let's just start off with, you have a lot of hats, and you're a guitarist, you're a independent teacher, you're a CEO, and of course, welcome. You are now among the world of podcasters. So
Yeah, that's right.
so I guess let's just start off with we'll go out of order here. Let's start off with some time management talk. Like, how do you
Oh,
keep all this straight? How do you organize your day, or maybe it's how do you organize your week or every 2 weeks to just find time to make sure everything that you want to get done is happening?
that's a great question. And what a fun place to start. One of the most difficult things of being into doing a million things. I would say that the time management piece is really a prioritization. And as you were saying, I'm a third generation music teacher. I love guitar. I love practicing guitar. Love songwriting. Love teaching kids and adults to play music. I also really appreciate building a tech company, which was a really fun experience and required a lot of time. And I also have kids and I have a family myself. So the time management piece is feels impossible in a way, but it's also really fun because it's just part of being engaged. And I think to answer your question, it's really about prioritization. I'm looking down at a notebook where I'm constantly just writing down different things that I need to do, whether it be in that day or whether in that week or in that month. And then I'm pretty ruthless about editing them, right? And I'm really working towards being able to say no to things that don't align with what I need to do, but also sometimes saying yes to things that might not align, but might trigger some creativity or create something that puts me into a flow state. So it's one of those things where there's a little bit of a gut check for each day. I am by nature, I think that I would call myself what people would say a workaholic, but I don't feel that way at all because I really love what I do. And my kids have grown up seeing me working in the evenings or working on weekends, but I've never felt that I needed to do it. I felt that I wanted to. And hopefully they would feel that I was still able to be mindfully engaged in their lives and present when I was, but also seeing me have just kind of a work ethic. So I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but it's a starting point that there's a lot of things in each day. And that's what makes life so interesting is that I can have meetings with marketing or finance or from Fons and that world. And then I can sit down for half an hour and play guitar. Then I can jump on a podcast with you or interview someone. Then I can do some free writing for this book that I'm doing. And I really love those changes. And then I can teach some kids in the afternoon and play some guitar. So,
This is just a topic that fascinates me, and it's something I feel like I've read dozens of books about it and heard hundreds of podcast episodes, and I keep trying to tweak my own system.
yeah.
Thing that I have found that is really helpful is that I have to have times during the week that are reserved for a certain type of thing. So, like my podcasting days are Tuesday and Thursday.
Mhm.
And mainly on Thursday, if I'm doing any recording, I mean, outside of like guests, but like if I'm doing like solo episodes, they're usually recorded on Thursday. Um, and not Tuesday because the garbage man comes during here, and even this noise canceling mic does not cancel out the garbage man. So, we have that scenario. But if I'm editing episodes, if I'm uploading, scheduling, that happens usually on a Tuesday or Thursday. If I'm working on a YouTube video, that'll happen on Friday, but so will organizations that I'm part of the board for. So, like North
Mhm.
Carolina Music Teachers Association, Winston-Salem Piano Teachers Association. If stuff is pending, I try to get it done on that day. And then if I'm trying to do church preparation stuff, it happens on a Monday. So, I've found that that's kind of imperative because if I kind of leave each day to a whim, uh, I might not choose what needs to get done. I might always choose what I want to get done, and sometimes that's there's a disconnect between those two things. It's like there's something important not getting done that I need to attend to. So I just wonder, is there anything that you found like that has made life easier for you, or are you just always stressed?
No, I would say that I'm not very stressed.
Hmm.
I would say that the thing that helps the most is saying no to a lot of things, which I've gotten increasingly better at doing. And then I'm a big fan of the Kanban board, right? As I'm prioritizing every day from my list of tasks for work, for my personal lists.
Sorry to
Uh,
describe that. What you said? Kanban?
a
Kanban?
Kanban board, you might know of it as like a Trello board or something, but the Kanban board is a vertically aligned stack of columns where you create cards. And I think this actually came from like Toyota manufacturing automobiles. I think that's where it was invented. If you haven't heard about that concept before, but Trello is an example of a Kanban board. GitHub has one too. And they use it a lot in building tech products or designing or manufacturing. And it's basically just on your left hand side, you have a list of tasks that are organized, right? And then that's that left hand column, and they're organized in order of importance that you're going to do them. And so it starts as just a list of ideas. Oh, here's the 20 things that I want to do in order that I do them. And you're constantly, it's called stack ranking. You're like, oh, this thing is more important. So or I need to do this before I do this next thing. So it's really helpful. You start with your list of ideas or things that you want to do, and then you start working on it. You drag it over into in process, right? And you can have multiple columns to a Kanban board, but then ultimately you drag it over to done. So it's really awesome, and I use it a lot. I learned it from managing an engineering team, right, and building a platform. That's how they work. And when you have 8 engineers building something, it's really helpful for them to just go to that Kanban board and pick that card on the top left hand and start working on it, drag it into progress, get feedback, work on it, put it into done. And so I use that for my life a lot. And really, that's been something really helpful. The other thing that's been the most helpful, this is my new big thing that I'm working on because I have so many meetings now. And I wake up on a Monday and there'll be 10 meetings on my calendar that are an hour long for the week. And almost all those meetings could be 15 minutes, right? So I'm working on this new concept of pleading, saying, instead of having a meeting, give me an agenda of what you want to accomplish. Let's do that async. When you come to the meeting, you already know what you're going to talk about. Like most hour-long meetings can be 30 minutes or less, and most 30-minute meetings can be 15 minutes or less. And so that's somewhere that I think, especially with what I'm doing now, working with large groups, meetings of 4 to 10 to 16 people, and you think, wow, there's 16 people in an hour-long meeting. That's 16 hours of people that they're not working. And another idea I'll throw out that's really consumed me later is the idea of context switching, right? Like right now, if my phone rang and I was like, "Hey, what's up? Oh, cool. I'll be right out. Hold up a second, David. I'll be right back." Like the flow of discussion that I'm in right now, I would be broken. I would break the context of what we're talking about. And this is whether you're practicing music and you're in the zone and you're working on a new piece and then something interrupts you and you just go do something else really quickly. Context switching is a real killer of productivity in my life, right? To where I get into a period of, say, I'm writing for an hour or I'm practicing for an hour. Anytime in there, if I get broken from it, then I have a really difficult time with context switching, with coming back to what I was focusing on in that same state. So I really try to avoid, and this is something as a manager of people, I've really tried too, is to give people space to avoid context switching, to avoid those interruptions. So you can work in a flow state, you can work focused for a period of time, then take a break.
So, listening to everything you just said, you are either a big fan of Cal Newport already, or you're waiting to discover him because everything you just said is.
I don't know who that is. So I guess
Oh,
I'm going to have to check this out.
okay, all right. So he has a podcast, and I think it's called Deep Life. But he's not. He's known for his books more than that. He also writes for the New Yorker, but he became kind of a big name when he wrote a book called Digital Minimalism, which was kind of about how limiting your time on social media. But he's a professor at Georgetown, and he studies computer. Well, he teaches computer science, but also he also studies like sociology and so
Mhm.
forth. It's kind of put those two things together. But his most important books, one is called Deep Work.
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course. I do know that book.
One is so good they can't ignore you. You know why skills trump. I don't even remember. It was something else in the workplace. But uh, I've read all his books. It's been a while, and he's got another book called A World Without Email, which is where he talks about the Trello board. But in all of his books, he talks about the importance, especially in deep work, about avoiding context shifting. And this is something that I've been saying a lot. And you actually this was something you said in that interview with Tracy that jumped out at me. Um, I think it's the one thing that I remembered. I was like, that's really helpful. And I've actually mentioned that on a recent podcast episode, not one that you've heard yet, but one that you will have heard, or it would have come out by the time this one comes out. And that was advice that you have given before about to students. So like, I want to go do gigs and I want to go teach. And I don't know, I want to go compose some, I want to become a composer. I want to become a conductor. Like there's a lot of things that we can do. And the advice that you gave on that episode was go all in with one thing first and build it up. And then get that to a point. Then you could try something else and you can go to the next thing. And I was nodding my head when I heard that because I was thinking about my entire 20s, like going into my early 30s, and I was trying to do about three or four things at once and not making
Mhm.
any traction on either one. And it sounds like kind of this is how you've lived your life. You were mainly, I mean, you started out as a guitar performer. I think you've mentioned before, like what's the big event? Is it GFA or
Oh yeah, that was my dream. Yeah, as a kid.
so that was that's where you were, and then of course you started teaching, and that became kind of your big thing. You've talked a lot about that. You've talked a lot about how you had some moment where you thought you weren't going to teach anymore. You changed your business practices, changed your mindset. You got that business to thrive, and then you started helping other music teachers, and then now you're into the world of podcasting, and I'm sure there's some things I'm forgetting, but the thing that I've noticed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't do any of that simultaneously. You approached each project as the next main thing and just worked out ways to keep up the other hats of your life. Is that kind of correct, you think?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that a lot of it happened out of necessity when I became a father, and had to really be mindful of how I spent my time. But I've always been, my father was a serial entrepreneur, and I learned a lot from watching him. He always had 2 to 3 businesses going outside of his main business. And so uh, he was somebody that I really observed how he approached life. And my grandfather was an amazing musician and a lifelong music teacher, and just did so much for the community that he served as a musician. So and as a teacher. So yes, I would say that it's true that I mostly would have this core professional piece that I was working on at a time. And I think looking back now, I would also just add to what you were saying that the period of time when we're a little bit all over the place, when we don't really know what we want to do and we don't really have that focus, whether it's a maturity thing or whether we just haven't learned how to work in that way yet, that's also what makes people become interesting. And it's kind of like my daughter just left to go to college. And one of the things that I kept encouraging, or I continue to encourage her about, is like, this is a time to become interesting.
Mhm.
And if you just do one thing, then yeah, that you could make great progress on that if you have that thing that you're driven towards. But that time in your 20s and 30s you were describing, that also created the fabric of who you are, that's unerringly unique, right? And interesting. So I do think that there's value to that season of your life and that season of your emotional maturity, or wherever it is that where you are. So
Excellent. Well, let's pivot a little bit. You are a veteran music teacher. We have an audience here
okay.
of music students. Some of them are autodidacts, some of them have a teacher. But, we talk a lot on this podcast about how to be better at practicing. And I know that you've thought a lot about this. You've thought a lot about a lot of this as a teacher, but I've also seen like some things that you've been doing on guitar. What are some, I don't know, just what are some of your experiences lately in practicing in terms of like accomplishing specific goals? And I don't know, what are some things lately you've noticed with students, that are issues that you've had to resolve?
Are you talking about pedagogically from a teacher perspective, or from
Well,
me as a
well,
student perspective?
well, either way. So, like, what are you having to coach your students on
Hmm.
that have? that have been in the way of them achieving a goal of theirs, but also, you're still a guitarist, you're still trying to find time for practice. Like, what are some things that you're doing to make your practice effective?
Sure. Well, one is my teaching style and my approach has been pretty similar for a long time, in that at the core, I am just a massive fan of studying music. I love everything about it. I've always loved it. I've loved taking lessons, guitar lessons, composition lessons. It has always brought me just incredible amounts of joy as a student. And I didn't start playing classical music until later. I was 18 when I started playing classical guitar, which is really late, impossibly late to start learning a classical instrument. But I was a really solid player because I'd played a bunch of different styles growing up that I was interested in. And I held on to that curiosity as an individual to where at these different seasons of my life, my goal as a guitarist right now is to sit down and be absolutely present for whatever time I have, and to be really mindful of certain things. And I teach this to my students too, and it's very similar to how athletes work, right? Which is to hyper focus on maybe just tone in my right hand or my left hand placement. And then to make time in my practice every time I play to just be joyful, right? And it could be I'm working on a Bach fugue, or it could be I'm just making up some folky fingerstyle thing, or maybe I'm going to fire up my electric guitar. And my real focus right now is to enjoy it and to not be judgmental. Because I spent so much of my life going to guitar recitals. I remember I used to do this thing. I would go to see these guitar players, and there was a little piece in me that was kind of waiting for the mistakes, right? And I was listening to this music, and I look back and I think that was just such a lame choice. Instead of just being lost in this music and being, just in that moment, I was comparing myself to it to be like, well, maybe they'll make the same mistakes I would make. I don't really know what all that was, but now as a nearly 50-year-old guitar player, I want to, as a person, use music as a vehicle, which is the same thing I do with a teenager that I'm teaching, is using music as a vehicle to develop as a human and to develop mindfulness and listening and development. So every time I sit down, I try to factor those things in, and I use it to teach my students. I have a great story to share that happened in this last couple weeks that's just so pertinent to this. And so one of my former students has become a really well-known MLS soccer player, right? He's been in the news a lot. He recently had a big game where they won the big league cup. It's the Seattle Sounders. Anyway, it's a great human being. I've known him forever. And the second piece to that is my son and my daughter. Of course, my wife's an actor. I'm a guitar player. Both of our kids are athletes. This is the way the universe works. But my son is really into basketball. And anyway, this guy comes over last week after he had a major moment on international television where he was playing against the greatest soccer player of all time, ended up scoring the clinching goal in the 89th minute. I mean, 70,000 fans. Our family was there. We followed him since he was a freshman in high school. And anyway, later that week, he shows up at my house and for a visit because he lives in the neighborhood. He's the coolest guy ever. But he shows up at my house with a copy of the Inner Game of Tennis, right? And he brought it for my son Huck. And he basically sat down with Huck, who is my son trains a lot for basketball. He's on the AAU scene. He plays every day. He's really serious about it. And he starts talking him through this idea of mindfulness and how he works to achieve a flow state on the field. And it was just a beautiful conversation because the crux of his conversation and what he brought was this book, which I'm sure you've probably read. It's really great. It applies to music really well. But B, he discussed this moment in the game where he missed a goal that was wide open, right? This is all just like music, by the way. Hopefully, if you're listening, this just really relates. And he explained to my son what was going on in his mind, how he had trained himself as a professional world class athlete to deal with being in the middle of this match, shanking a shot and missing it, and what he did. And it was rooted in this book. And the idea of it was as soon as he missed the shot, his mind focused on what he had trained, which is to focus on the sound of the cleats hitting the ball, right? It's a mindfulness exercise to allow to bring you back into a flow state. And I'm listening to this story, and it's reminding me that my best friend was a professional tennis player, and we bonded 25 years ago over the same book because as I was preparing to be a concert classical guitarist, that book was one of the backbones of how I approached playing guitar, right? Which was being able to train my mind to play through difficult moments, to deal with difficult situations, to be more creative and more expressive. So it's kind of interesting how those things all interlock and inform each other.
Nice. Well, a lot of thoughts based on that. So I've never read The Inner Game of Tennis, but I have on my shelf over here The Inner Game of Music, which came out in, well, I don't know. I guess it came out in the early 90s. It was given to me as either a high school or graduation or college.
Yeah, it was a spin-off.
And it has the same original author, W. Timothy Galway, but it's co-written with Barry Green, who was a symphony bassist for some orchestra. I don't remember which one. Um, but yeah, but he does go over a lot of the same concepts. But I would be interested to just see the original take, and because I know that original book's from like the 70s or somewhere around there. So I have to check that
And
out.
it's still awesome. Yeah.
Something else that you said, it brought back memories. You talked about how you used to go judge, have this judgmental attitude and wait for the mistakes when you go hear recitals. And I think that's a lot in the 20s. So I studied as a composer,
Yeah.
and uh, I sure had a lot of high-minded opinions about other composers, especially in the world of film music. And frankly, I still kind of do, if I'm being honest. There's a few film composers out there that, if I kind of just let myself go, I might say some things that are not as kind. But for the most part, I think this is the way, especially like ambitious people and musicians, especially this is how we are in our 20s, in our teens and our 20s, and I see most people kind of grow out of this and they grow into something that's more accepting and more open. I've had some landmarks along the way. Like while I was in grad school, I was classmates with someone who's actually, I think, 8 years older than I was. He was a little later coming back to grad school, so I was 22 and he was 30. And he had kind of his moment of clarity while he was there. He was talking about somebody that he was bad mouthing as a composer when we started grad school. And by the end, he was saying, I've rethought about this take, and what that composer does is different than what I want to do. But he does it so well, and people who listen enjoy listening to him. So he's doing what I wish I could do, which is to reach people with the way that I want to do music. That's what he's doing. And then I had another moment. I was walking in the mall, maybe 5 or 10 years later, and there was some pop song playing, over the speakers. And my first impression was, I don't really care for this. But then I watched this teenage girl come out of like one of the department stores, like J.C. Penney or whatever it was. And she's just got this rapturous look on her face, just singing along to the music she's hearing. And I just thought to myself, well, who am I to judge this music if that music can have that effect on that person right there? And so there's still the instinct, to be judgmental, but life experience shows you that what you might scoff at means something to someone else.
Mm, yes, it sure does. And there's nothing long term, there's nothing really to be gained from it either, right? And there's so many, from what you just said, there's so many like great points to it. But one of which is just that you don't understand if the person listening to the music is listening to the art or the artist, which is something I find really interesting. Like if you take the lyrics of Kurt Cobain or the way his delivery. I remember when Nirvana came out and how they were ripped on by so many musicians because of the technical thing. And then you say, well, okay, well, look at his lyrics. He's probably saying something. They make no sense. Yet they transmit so much. And I think it's really important and I love this as a teacher is trying to connect with my students on what is moving them in art and helping teach them to approach it with an open mind because as a young person in that season you get to where you only listen to that thing and that's the only thing that's good. And I think this is something as teachers we can make that connection to say, oh, I'm gonna sit down with you and I know Bach sounds like something that's like old school, but I'm gonna play this piece for you and I'm gonna show you how it's got just as much, passion and just as much expression and just much divine inspiration as this pop song that you think is the greatest thing you've ever heard in the whole world. So I think that that can work both ways. And the last thing I'd say is this great realization as you get older is you realize we're not the same people, right? We are different people. I mean, every single day in this moment we're existing in, it's okay. We are different than what we were in our 20s, and that's a good thing. And we hear music differently, and hopefully we still have open minds. And I remember my grandfather, who was such a tremendous musician, and he was a big band jazz leader. He was a classical level pianist. I mean, he was really, really special. But he hated anything past that hadn't was written after probably 1950 with just a with a fervor. He just so didn't enjoy it. And I never vibed with that. And I get where he was coming from because that was his aesthetic and that was his era. But I remember being young and thinking, oh, I don't want to be like that. Like I think I want to follow the whole journey of art and music. And if it's your thing and you're listening and you're a student and you just like bluegrass music and that's all you like, then cool, do your thing. Like that's gonna be your trip. But the world of art is so vacuous and expressive and awesome. It's good to try to keep an open mind.
Yeah, I had to look up this quote. I was just thinking about how one of my you might call it a virtue, but you might also call it a shortcoming. Depending on the situation, is that as I analyze the heck out of everything.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to.
That is your style.
Yeah, I just try to figure, and that might be the composer in me. It's like I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out why am I choosing that F sharp instead of an F natural. It's just the types of things that you're constantly going through. But I really like this quote. I didn't know where it came from, so I just looked it up. But it's by the painter named Edward Hopper.
Oh yeah.
And his quote is, "If you could say it in words, there would be no reason to paint." And that's the original quote, but I've seen that modified. If you could say it in words, there'd be no reason for the music. And and I realize, of course, not talk about music with lyrics, but just about the art in general, like what moves us. Well, sometimes we don't know. It's like it hits something subliminal, and we don't know what it is. And especially if you're a teacher, you don't know with your students what's going to resonate until you just try a bunch of stuff and just see.
Mm. That I was just listening like maybe a couple days ago. I was walking in the woods listening to an Alan Watts lecture from I think the 60s. And the theme behind it, this section was the clumsiness of words,
Mhm.
which is like, this is a tree. Well, that does no justice to what this is in front of you, this being or whatever it is, expressing itself and everything that makes a tree. And he was getting to the same thing you just said, which is what can't be expressed in words. Words are clumsy. We try to use our words as teachers to instill the curiosity or maybe open those windows to see it in the way that you're seeing it, but it's still clumsy. You got to be able to develop yourself or have the curiosity to look to see it or to find it or have your own interpretation of it. But I think that's a great point you make.
I mean, so much we can talk about, but there's just a couple more things that I want to get to. So this is something that I know that you've thought about. You've shared a few videos on the Fons family page before, kind of in this neighborhood. So let's talk about this. We live in interesting times. The proverb, "May you live in
Yeah.
interesting times." Um, we live in a world where AI is becoming more prevalent, and so many things have changed. Like look across the industries. I mean, I could do a whole episode on how like the world of being a film composer has changed, and you know, the world of being a private teacher has changed so much. But just what, in a nutshell, what are some thoughts of encouragement that you have for being a musician and finding success in the year 2025 and going forward with all that we have in our society right now?
Oh, I think it's yeah, to me, that's just I see so much opportunity. Like, I can't think of a better time in my life, and just to kinda to jump off what you're talking about is the prime center of all this is we're doing things that are human. And in my take, the whole AI thing and technology, these are great tools, and they're useful for things that don't require humanity. They're terrible at doing things that are human. My I think my gift was always connecting with people, which is why I love teaching so much. I mean, I light up when a new kid walks into the studio. I feel nervous when a new student shows up to see if we're a good fit because I really want that relationship to click and I want to be really open for it. And so in my opinion about music and teaching and art and communication is that those human things will become more and more important over the coming years when basic analysis and data that's just going to be that's not a big deal. That's not going to be difficult anymore. Those things will be easy. But being able to create art, write, bring people together, have someone open up and tell you their life story, because people are still going to have life stories, and to teach people how to be human, right? To teach people how to like put their hands in the dirt or and start a garden or do something that makes them feel alive. And that's the only way that the AI, because the AI thing is going to be what it's going to be. We don't know what impact it will have. But the people who communicate, the people who create art, the people who can teach people how to be more human, I think they're going to thrive. And I think there's going to be more value because right now, if I was full time teaching, my value proposition would change. I would be, which it's always kind of been this, but it'd be like, yes, I'm a guitar teacher, but I use guitar to teach mindfulness, presence, goal setting, discipline, problem solving, human expression, emotion, connection with other people. That's what my website would be if I was going all in on teaching right now. And I think I'd be really busy because I'd be good at this. And I've always been good at this. My students generally tend to grow up to be pretty awesome adults historically, even if I'm just a little part of that of their journey. And so I would lean into it where the music would become the vehicle for the human. And yeah, and so when I get excited about it because I think that I've seen the last 10 years I've really been monitoring and studying the industry of private music lessons and personal trainers and tutors and all these things. And really, there's a big increase in people wanting their kids to play violin, play piano, compose music, write songs. So I think we're actually entering a time where there's a huge advantage if you have this energy. Because the other energy is to be like, oh, whatever, Spotify doesn't pay me enough. And like, what's the point? And like, those people are going to find something else to do. They would have found something else to do anyway,
Yeah.
right? Whatever, I'm going to the coffee shop. That energy, that's going to take you down with that path, whatever that's going to be. But if your eyes are open and you're focused on whatever it is about what you do, even if you're learning an instrument, you're curious and you're loving it and you're smelling a new guitar, which smells so good, and sticking your nose in the sound hole and feeling the strings for the first time, you'll feel alive. So I'm very optimistic about a lot of things because I think a lot of pendulums have shifted, just like AI, just like society. A lot of super heavy stuff out there, but I think that sets the groundwork for a shift the other way, right? For these ideas. I'm an optimist.
And it's something I have to remind myself. Yeah, I try to be as neutral as I can. There's a lot of drama in the political world, right?
Yeah.
And
Understatement.
yeah, and for a lot of people, it's probably scary in a way. Um,
Yeah.
and I think about, like some of the most creative, I mean, some of the best works, in my opinion, that like Beethoven wrote was while Napoleon was walking or marching around and terrorizing Europe, basically coming through there. I mean, that was his third, fourth, fifth, sixth symphonies, all written in around this time. I think about Shostakovich writing Symphony Number Seven everyone around him is dying of starvation because the Nazis have seized his city, and nobody can leave, and he's stuck there for like 2 years, but he manages
Mhm.
to write the symphony and get it smuggled out so that the New York Philharmonic can premiere it while World War II is going on. And I think you find that out throughout like history. It's like where there are times of turmoil, artists thrive. And I think that's important. I have to remind myself that when I get maybe down on situations, societies, whether it's AI
Mm.
or whether it's something political, um, this is where artists are needed more. And I know that you've thought a lot about that, and that's why I definitely wanted. That's probably the main reason I wanted to chat with you about this because I know that you are an optimist and you see these opportunities.
We know I've had really interesting conversations with my friends, and I think just like music and sports align, startup founders, other people in the tech scene, and with just really who are really up to speed with what's going on with AI and the world and the real the kind of consensus I think is that that's just a tool. That's all it'll ever be. I would never write. I don't write using AI. I don't do posts using AI. I do them my anything that I want to be human, I just don't do it. And if it's not worth doing, it's not worth doing. But research, anything that's time consuming, that's just that doesn't need to be human, analysis, research, I use it all day long, and it's actually been a huge help to my workflow, right? And I think that that in it, and also to the point you were just making about art in the time of turmoil, you're talking about the pressure cooker of suffering, right? Being art coming from that.
Mhm.
Will we see during this experience of that, which we're definitely living through? A lot of people are suffering. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety. Will that pressure cooker create expression that comes out and that creates change? And because art is generally the thing that is the catalyst for what will become a movement, right? For what will become a new way of thinking, for what will become elevated consciousness, um, group consciousness amongst people, which I think it's going to happen, and this is the perfect environment for it, right? So, yeah, I can't help but think that there's going to be a lot of good things coming, and there might be a lot more suffering coming down the pipeline too, right? And that's something we don't know, but it doesn't help to worry about it, right? Because the worry and the anxiety doesn't, it won't change it. It does help to be informed and to look for the opportunities to do what you can do.
Right. Well, this may be a conversation for another time. I know that your main thought, and I know a lot of times when you come on these podcasts as guests, you're talking a lot about from the perspective of being a teacher
Yeah.
because that is mainly what you've been doing the last few years is helping other teachers. So we talked a little bit about the mindset, but I don't want to keep you all day. So this is so maybe just like I don't know if someone asks what are like the one or two most important things that you want musicians to know when they're thinking about starting teaching for the first time, what what is something that you think that they need to keep in mind to be successful not only pedagogically but also something that they can sustain as a business? What are some important things that like I know you can go on for an hour about this, but like what do you think are the most important things that get overlooked by like especially students who are just getting started, like coming out of school?
I Actually, I have a strong opinion about that, which is I think that there is incredible value in the energy of someone who's just getting started. So, the most important thing about starting a business as a musician and being entrepreneurial is without question, who you are as a human. That's what's going to be the thing that drives these micro entrepreneurs, which is what you'll be. You're out there, you're like, I'm going to start my own business, I'm going to start teaching, this is what I'm going to do. And it's that energy. because I remember being a young teacher and I was so pumped to teach and I was getting all these students. I was getting more new students than my teachers were getting. And I knew I wasn't nearly as good of a teacher, as skilled. I wasn't as pedagogically trained, but I really loved it. And I was so into it and I was so invested in their progress. I felt like I made a great impact when I was a young teacher just getting started. So I think the business piece of it is something that can be learned. And the second thing is as soon as you possibly can is to within your mind, if you want to start sharing this amazing thing that you spent years studying, learning, caring about, the thing that you were attracted to so much that you decide to devote a significant part of your life to it, you're going to give that gift back. You're going to impact people the way teachers impacted you, whatever your journey is. The second side of it is as soon as you can possibly adopt the mindset of being a business owner and being entrepreneurial, because many people I talk to just don't. And I remember I was in studying music industry. I was in college, and someone came in to talk about, the business side of things. I remember just thinking, "Oh, who is this loser? Like, what? That's not for me. I'm an artist." And it wasn't until later that I was trying to feed myself that I was like, "Oh gosh, I should probably pick up on this." But the sooner you do it, the better, because some people do and some people don't. Some people never grasp onto that idea that I'm responsible for making this a business. And that if I do, I can then be more of an artist, right? I can be more creative and more expressive, and I can generate more work if I can sustain myself. And for many people, they shy away from it. So it's a two-piece answer to your question, which is I think you've got to have the energy, you've got to have the love, you've got to be willing to want to give that gift to your community or whoever it is that you're impacting, even if you're doing stuff online. And two, you've got to adopt this mindset that at least part of my week, I'm a business owner. And that's not gross. I'm going to do it in a beautiful way because I deserve to eat and I deserve to have a place to live. Right. So that's kind of, I think those are my starting points. Because
And
if you do that, everything else works out.
I'm gonna encourage, everybody. Of course, we're gonna talk about your podcast at the end, but I just encourage people to go check out, other interviews you've given because you've talked, if they're interested in getting started with music, you've talked a lot about that. In fact, on my other podcast, Life in the Pit, we did talk more about that just from a business perspective, because we were talking more to, people who did teach, on that episode. So,
Hmm.
let's kind of just wrap up with I guess your two of your recent projects in many years. As I've said before, um, on the show notes, I have put a link to Fons for anybody who wants to try, and I've mentioned it every now and then that I've been a client for a while. But let's hear it from the source himself. And Eric, just tell us a little bit about this is for music teachers and prospective music teachers out there. What is Fons and how does it help them do their business better?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Fonz was basically a platform that I was our very first customer. It's a CRM. It was built to manage the relationship between a music teacher and their students and to help them run businesses. And the thesis behind Fonz is to create an app, to create a platform that manages all the stuff that's not generally super comfortable to talk about, whether it's waiting for payments, asking your students to pay you, chasing payments, your policies, your expenses, your schedule, booking. And so Fons is a platform. Fons means fountain in Latin. That's where it originally came from. And so that's the basic gist of it. It's a business tool for music teachers or music schools. But what got interesting is over the years is we had a lot of swim schools, academic tutors, personal trainers started using it. So we really learned these little business tricks that different industries used and applied. And we baked them into the app if we thought it was something that reduced friction. I'm very I feel like I was a good business owner, but I'm also very sensitive. I didn't like talking about money in front of a student. I thought it was lame. I hated asking a parent where the check was. I hated asking a kid to give me that check out of their pocket. So Fonz fundamentally, their goal is to give the teacher a really professional presence and a sense of business acumen just by using the tool, but also removing the things that are lame, chasing payments, asking for money, things like that.
I've never told you this, but I've taught for years at well, it was a music store. They've closed the store portion of it, but they've kept the studios open as kind of just individual studios. But there's several teachers there, and there was a guitar teacher that I just caught him coming out to meet a new student one time, I think meet the parent, probably the mom, I believe, and meet the student. And the first words out of this teacher's mouth was, so yeah, the payment is this much money, and did you bring a check? And I was kind of horrified at that. This was probably 15 years ago. This was long before I met you and probably long before Fons was a thing. But even when I was back into cash and check mode is how I accepted payments. I just
Yep.
thought of that being the first impression that this student and his family ever have is to go ask for the check. I just found that horrifying. And
It's a terrible vibe.
yeah.
I love that you mentioned that story and how it stuck with you
Mhm.
because that is a first impression for what could be a 5, 8 year relationship. There's a term in business called LTV, the lifetime value of a student. And, many students will stay with you and spend 10, $20,000 studying with you over the course of 5 years. Right. And you're going to have that first interaction being petty. Where's the
Yeah.
cat? I only take cash because I don't want I'm trying to hide it. Or, yeah, where's the check? Or that is not a long-term mindset or worldview of the relationship you're building. So you want to try to create the opposite of what you described, which is,
Oh, yeah, I do want to jump in something about Fonz. This is something that I did hear you say one time, and it gave me a nudge to at the very least go check out the Facebook group Fonz Family, and I
yeah,
would say everybody go check that out. I was not a client for a year, and yet I was able to have the benefits of just hearing other teachers talk about their business and so forth. But there was something that you said on, and it may have been the same interview, or it may have been another one that I heard you talk about, and it's this friction. And I know some teachers that still have this. They talk about credit card fees. They don't want to take credit cards. They don't. And I think during the time, like Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, these are all kinds of things. And there's things that I've done. I've never done Venmo, but I've done Cash App. I've done PayPal, and so forth. And you know, one of the things that you said is, if you're going to be a business, you want to look like it and act like it. If you're asking for Cash App, instead of just allowing someone to input their bank information like they would with any other business, that that doesn't look that great, but also you're at the mercy of these kind of companies to change their policies instead of having a platform like Fonz, which is designed for music teachers and supportive of their needs. And just to kind of speak personally on that whole idea of fees, because there are fees associated with the transactions, and
yeah,
that is the fact that I get paid every month the same thing by every student, who's not even really thinking about that money hardly ever because it comes out automatically.
right.
That I mean that make more than makes up for any fees. And then I find, because I'm not ever asking about money except occasionally when when I'm doing a renewed policies,
Yeah.
that except for like those moments, I just find like our relationships entirely about the music. I don't ever talk about the business part of that. And
Yeah.
and by the way, just one other thing about Fonz that I'll also say is you guys update it quite a bit. Like, I just recently discovered, oh, there's a place for me to put my policies. I can actually upload it as a PDF, and it's like that's handy because I was realizing I've signed up some new students lately, and I've forgotten to even talk about my policies, and until it
Oh,
comes up, and I'm like, oh, well, they can just get it delivered to them the first time, that they do a transaction. It's like, okay, that's good.
Oh, well, we could talk for an hour what you just mentioned, but and I love that you what you closed with, which is you don't even talk about your policies, and that music teachers in general can have that because A, students don't read them. They're only good to refer back to when you need to for something. Like your student doesn't care. They just want to take lessons with you. You making it as simple as possible. Me as a parent, I just want to pay you and have my student come in and have a great time studying with you. This is a kind of a huge win for everybody. But the journey of accepting automated payments, credit card payments, we know the benefit of it, which is that it makes you more professional, allows you to get paid on time every month. There's no late payments. I know that when we started Fons, I was running my studio the way people used to, preferring cash, invoicing every month. Checks would come in sometime in the first week. I'd beg kids for them. And I wanted Fons to just be, because I was adamant, I'm never doing, of course, this is 2016. We're not ever doing credit cards. That is not happening. That's not going to be a thing. I'm not paying the fees. And I sat in literally a room of like 8 engineers, a UX, UI designer, and I find it, and they're like, Branner, we've looked at your business model. We're getting ready to build this app around your business model. And they're like, honestly, this sucks. Like, do you have any idea how much you have $7,000 in payments in your books that haven't been paid from the
Mm.
last 10 years? Because these are families, not that they couldn't afford it. You just forgot to get the payment. They had a divorce and whatever. They're like, and you're spending 15 hours a month of time chasing these people. Do you not see this? And you look kind of like unprofessional. This is the 21st century. So I was our biggest arguer against automating payments at first until I became our first customer. And then I was like, oh, wow, not only does this solve all those being paid on time, but it's also a write off, right? And so if you think about yourself going to see a professional or do to do anything, it's not a great vibe to be like, oh, I'd prefer you to pay me Venmo friends rate, even though that's specifically not for business, or it just doesn't have that same vibe that we talked about in that first experience or ongoing experience. So,
I know Fons is also associated with Alfred's Music. There's a mutually
yeah.
beneficial link that teachers can sign up for, and
Hmm.
students can buy at a discount, and teachers get a little bit of a commission from that. So, like, there's just so many things there. I just encourage everybody to go check it out. You usually have a
Thanks,
trial,
David.
don't you?
Yeah, yeah. There's a trial, and but honestly, it's one of those things where it's we want people to see the value of it, and they're welcome to take the time they need to figure it out and see if it's a good fit for them, because it's not necessarily as much Fonz as it is. I think Fonz does a really good job of mindfully wrapping all these things together, but it's really just having the systems in place that say I'm going to be professional. I'm going to automate my payments to make it easy for me and my students. And so it's less about the platform and it's more about the overall mindset of saying, and I really I love thank you for mentioning the Fonz family, which has been the greatest help, which it's a Facebook group where everyone's so cool and people because none of us are competing. Like I can talk to 100 guitar players or guitar teachers. None of us are competing because we're all serving different markets. And so it behooves us to share our marketing tips and how we do sales. And it's beneficial because it elevates the entire industry. So I'd encourage checking that out first. That's a great spot to check out.
All right, final thing. So again, welcome to the world of podcasting.
Yeah, thanks.
Podcast. I've only checked out one of the episodes so far, but it's good stuff. And so tell us about it, and make sure you tell us why is it called 440.
Yeah, so it's for many of you that may not know, Fons was acquired by a company called Peaksware uh, and about almost 3 years ago now. It's been a minute. And Peaksware is a company, they own a bunch of apps for sports. They own an app called Train Heroic and Training Peaks, which like Tour de France teams use and stuff. It's a really cool company. They actually have their overview is this idea of something called deliberate practice from that book Peak. And so they support these apps in both sports and music. Again, that's the third time that's come up today, the relationship between sports and music. So anyway, Peaksware acquired Fonz. They also own Alfred Publishing, Make Music, which is the school app, and Fonz. And so I am moving less into running Fonz day to day and more into somewhat of an evangelical role for an evangelist role for the all the platforms. And one of those things I'm doing is I started a podcast, and it's called the 440. And 440 is a concert pitch, the vibration of an A. That's where that came from. Thought that might attract some musicians.
Right.
Where I interview people in the music industry, composers, educators, business owners, around a lot of the ideas of what we've talked about today, which is their journeys, their processes, their systems, and how they've created this kind of what my wife and I always call the income quilt. What we creatives do to build these businesses around our work. So it's been really fun. I'm really excited for it, and oh, it's a whole new thing to learn how to do, by the way, right? So I'm really enjoying it.
This year's my fifth anniversary. It was past summer, so between
Yeah.
podcasts and I will go ahead and tell you, because I know you like to add projects. If you're thinking about adding a second podcast at the same time, don't.
Don't
It
do it.
it is very hard to keep up with two. It's like so.
Okay.
I can very rarely get to my other one, but
I'm glad you. I will keep that in mind.
and just to mention, so 440 is spelled out. It's FOURFORTY. So it's not like the number, but yeah.
But if you search the number, it'll come up too, though.
Great. All right. What would you like to share? Where can people follow you? We talked about Fons Family on Facebook, but where can people follow you where you post and, just anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll share all those links with you. But yeah, I'm on Instagram, pretty much at eBranner, everywhere at Threads, Instagram, um, Facebook. But yeah, and I delight in conversations with other people that are doing this type of work. So I'll share my email too if someone has an idea or wants to chat about something. I'm always available.
Eric, I know we could keep going on for quite a while, but it's just a joy to always check in and talk with you and
Oh
just get
yeah.
your thoughts on all these things. So thank you for being a guest today.
Oh, David, thank you so much for having me. It's always great to see you. I always look forward to chatting with you. Thanks so much.
And that's going to wrap up today's episode. But before we finish, I just want to remind you that if at any point you are a music teacher and you want to check out Fons to see what they have to offer on this episode or any of the previous episodes and probably future episodes that you would like to go check out Fons, you can do so by clicking the link at the end of my show notes. Thank you so much for checking out today's episode, for listening all the way to the end. And please feel free to share this episode with a friend if you think they might get something out of it. So I'll be back with you again next week. Until then, thank you so much for listening.